So hello fellow Earthlings, this is Earthling 6455463728, and I wanted to talk about the problems with dialogue. It's not guaranteed problems, but there certainly are problems with respect to dialoguing with, as we were talking about, the author of Give the Devil His Due, this guy who came on to Joe Rogan the other day that I was talking about. I can't remember his name. Well, the idea, of course, is that I'm going to say it in a harsh way that maybe people on the right can appreciate. You can become contaminated with the ideas of the people that you're dialoguing with. If you're a black person who is talking to members of the KKK, you can start to doubt yourself as to the worth of minorities. And believe this idea that black people are inherently bad or inherently aggressive, all of these other things. If you are somebody like Joe Rogan, who perhaps has friends on the left and right, you can end up speaking in ways that sound like, and this is a specific problem that I see mainly on the left. But I'm talking from somebody who's on the left. Are you exactly on the left? I mean, I know that with respect to the Second Amendment that, everybody's supposed to be in favor of it. I don't know why. I don't know why the Constitution needed amendments, right? So it wasn't perfect, right? So why do you uphold these amendments, these fixes that might need fixes? Why does everybody hold them up as these shining absolutes? But anyway, I don't want to go too farther on that road because that's something else that I'd like to talk about. A stick is a weapon. A stick is arms. A slingshot is arms. Nobody needs to have gunpowder, a right to gunpowder. But anyway, when you dialogue with people on the opposing side, there is contact transfer. Both sides can leave with a little bit of the other side. I mean, if you look at it, for example, it has been suggested that show me your 5 closest relationships and I can define who you are. And if you are close relationships with people who are on the opposing side point of view, you can come to a middle ground when a middle ground is probably not a good idea. It's interesting that is not something that people, and in this instance I'm talking about Bill Maher and Joe Rogan, and it seems like in many instances that they beat up on the left more than they beat up on the right, and then they say, yeah, but I'm on the left. Are you really on the left? With respect to, owning guns, etc., I would say, and I have said before, that given the amount of actual fatalities with respect to gun violence, I think it's a non-issue. I think that most of the deaths, 2/3 of the deaths that are as a result of guns in the U.S. are suicides. The rest of the violence would be about 11,000 fatalities. Of course, there are a lot of injuries and other things beyond that, but it is by and large orders of magnitude more problematic with respect to other issues that have a lot more important issues, really. I mean, it's probably along the lines specifically with respect to deaths, like traffic accidents. I really have to look up traffic accidents, but they're in the same ballpark, I would say. So there are some things that I think that are just non-issues that we don't even have to argue about. With respect to, let's say, Bill Maher, I don't see that Bill Maher, how am I going to put it? he has people on his guests like Milo, whoever his name was. Was it a gay Jewish person who was an author for Breitbart, and then he ended up saying the wrong thing on I think it might have been Joe Rogan's and Bill Maher's. No, it was being on Joe Rogan's show actually that did him in. And he was an up and coming star for the right. Is it neo-nationalists or whatever they were calling themselves? And I have met people who have absorbed the views of the other side, and they look at themselves and their communities with disdain, completely falling hook, line, and sinker for what the other side has, given them, whatever snake oil or whatever it is. And from my perspective, I'll tell you part of the reason why I feel it's dangerous to give some of these, the other side, a viewpoint. As I've said, it's just easy, very easy, to start believing what you're hearing, because that's one of, I don't know exactly what they call it, but the more often you hear something, the more credible it becomes in your mind. And I think that we are forming neural pathways that respond to certain ideas when we hear them over and over and over, and unwittingly we are becoming those things. Aside from the danger of becoming it, the more often you hear it and you're not even thinking, this is crazy, I know that I believe this, but you hear it over day in, day out, then suddenly, doesn't it become one of those voices in your head? And I mean, that's an extreme scenario, but is it really? I mean, if one of the 5 people that define who you are is somebody from an opposing point of view, who's to say that you're not going to hear it enough and then suddenly just start believing it? And I don't mean just suddenly. I mean, one day is going to seem to you like, oh, I just started believing this, when it might have been, a year or a year and a half or 2 years or whatever. And I can speak from my point of view, which is that some of these conspiracy theories that I remember I was listening to Flat Earth. The Flat Earth, and with respect to the moon, not us not landing on the moon. And I know the realities of some of these things. For example, that if somebody, the furthest that you can see around you is about 3 miles. If the earth were flat, there shouldn't be a limit on how far you can see, especially the higher you go. But there is a limit because the earth curves. And you can also see, let me see. I mean, you can also see that the moon is an orb, the sun is an orb, the other planets are orbs, but we are going to be flat. Are we going to take it all the way back to, that everything rotates around the earth, whatever it is? But the thing is, the more you start hearing the excuses, because you need to have excuses for the reasons why the earth would be flat, the more you start hearing those excuses, the more they start to seep into your brain. I know for me personally, I could feel myself slipping into that conspiracy-minded mindset then, of thinking, maybe we didn't land on the moon. Or maybe the earth is flat. I've never been up in space to see it, even though I've seen video of it, but I've never actually been there to see it. And even if I was, who's to say it wouldn't be a video screen of what they want me to see, whoever they are? So I think it can be dangerous. I think it can be, in the instances, for example, of the black guy who converted directly or indirectly a bunch of KKK members who became ex-KKK members. In his case, I really, it's maybe I need to read his book, but I find it hard to appreciate really how he would have been able to resist falling for some of the ideas that they might have had in the KKK and not have it be the opposite way around. One of the interesting things about his situation is that he had to be of a very unique personality in order to achieve what he had. Number one, he had to be very relaxed around white people, because that's where he first met somebody who was a KKK member. He was in a bar that was completely white with a band and being the only black member of the band. And he said in his, in his conversation with Joe Rogan, I believe, that that some of the KKK guys, he actually liked some of them. And, in order to spend time with them, in order to spend enough time with them to convert them, I would assume that it was more than most of them that he met that he could feel some kind of camaraderie with. Other than that, it would just be him. And why would they even want to meet him if they didn't think that he was okay? So maybe I need to read his book and so on, but he obviously is a unique individual. To have found himself and not have some of those ideas. And then again, maybe in talking to him, you might discover some of that. With respect to Joe Rogan, okay, so he is how would you say it? He's a Second Amendment, a fervent supporter of the Second Amendment. He has however many guns, like I said. What other positions are? His number one position seems to be just a support for Trump. And don't get me wrong, when I say it the way that I do, it is that in many instances I would have had a support for Trump. Meaning that Trump would say something and I would say to myself, well, that sounds reasonable, only to find out that it might have been something that he just made up. Like with respect to the Charlottesville people, he said the other side, the people who were protesting against the white supremacists, they hadn't gotten a permit. That was an outright lie. They had gotten a permit. And in the amount of time that Trump has been in power, I have realized that he has lied so many times that I don't trust anything that he says. And I never come out in support of him on almost anything, because I realize that that's the kind of individual that he is. He's a user, and any, benefit of the doubt that I would have given him is really a waste of time. And yet Joe Rogan finds himself in many situations or many instances picking on the reporters to say, hey, they shouldn't ask him this question, or they shouldn't ask him that question, or why are they wasting time? And I'm like, Joe, they're there every single day. Every single question under the sun is probably going to leave their mouth. And you are finding fault with some of the questions that they're asking him. I mean, maybe you're watching, too many of those briefings. And then maybe you're just watching it on an empty stomach. Maybe you're hungry or something, because Trump lies repeatedly. The reporters are just asking him benign questions, and he treats them with contempt, which they cannot return. In order to find a fault with the questions that they're asking him, and not with him, you have to overlook the gross disrespect that he treats them with, and you have to overlook his lies, and still find a way to find a fault with these people who are drawing his ire and his disrespect and lying to their faces and making up statistics and all these other things. That it doesn't look good, Joe. It doesn't. And with respect to Bill Maher, there are many, I don't know, maybe that's just what am I saying? Maybe that is just who he is. I don't know that he's really that left. Some of the things that he said in the past, like people leaving Syria, he's like, they should stay and fight. Fight who? For what? They shouldn't leave Syria. There's bombings. Here you are in a city, you just want to go to work. But now you should stay and fight. Fight who? Not try to live with your family some other place. You just need to figure out any one of the factions that you should join and pick up some dice, throw the dice, and decide who you're going to die for or die with. You know, Bill Maher himself is not. Yeah, I could easily see him on the right, because sometimes he does not make sense and he's not really very nice, which is some aspects that I see on the right. Yes, on the left as well, but in many instances, part of being on the right is recognizing that the world is a dog-eat-dog world, and then just accepting it. And I think that you can't equate the two things. There are people on the left who are perhaps not as polite and nice as they should be, but what they're fighting for is it's not comparable. To force people to carry babies to term, to force people not to have their union recognized, to force, that seems to be a lot of what, you know, is in conservative politics. How can we force people or prevent people from voting? I don't know that those are things to fight for. Even if these people are as rude as comparably rude, the actual thing that you're fighting for kind of makes a lot of difference. So anyway, guys, you can wish me luck if you like. You can like or unlike, comment, subscribe, and or share. Peace.